Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on the webinar today regarding the CalMedForce annual review for all awardees. My name is Robin Simpson, and I'm the CalMedForce Program Director at Physicians for a Healthy California. On the call today are David Kurt and Victoria Chesley, who are two of our program analysts. My colleagues and I hope to answer all your questions about the annual review, which is an annual reporting requirement for the CalMedForce grant. We have a lot of information to cover in today's webinar, and we'll have an opportunity to answer any questions that you may have at the end of the slideshow. If possible, please hold your questions for the end. All participants are going to be placed on mute during today's webinar. You can absolutely submit a question through the question function, and our team will monitor the questions, may be able to answer them during the webinar. If not, we will definitely address all questions at the end. Please note we are recording today's webinar. It will be emailed to all awardees and posted to PHC's website by the end of this week. Here's our agenda for the webinar today. We'll go over very quickly the governance structure for CalMedForce, talk a little bit about sort of a high-level overview of the annual review, then go into more detail of each piece of the annual review, which consists of the program assessment, financial report, ACGME letter of accreditation, and the resident change table, and talk about next steps, including deadlines. We'll start with CalMedForce's mission and governance. So our mission statement is right up here. We're committed to growing a diverse physician workforce by supporting, incentivizing, and expanding graduate medical education in California. Our goal is to grow and strengthen the physician pipeline to meet the growing demands of California's growing patient population with a focus on medically underserved areas and populations. Our governing statute is Proposition 56, which California voters approved in 2016. It was sponsored by the California Medical Association, California Hospital Association, and Service Employees International Union. Proposition 56 was approved by voters in 2016 and allocates $40 million annually towards graduate medical education to sustain, retain, and expand California residency positions in primary care and emergency medicine. University of California is the designated recipient of the funding and contracts with PHC to administer the GME grant program CalMedForce. This slide shows the section of Prop 56 that governs our program. At the top, Part C states that $40 million will be provided to UC with the goal of increasing the number of primary care and emergency medicine physicians. The funds are to be used to sustain, retain, and expand graduate medical education programs. Part 1 defines primary care to include internal medicine, family medicine, obstetrics, gynecology, and pediatrics. Part 2 says that funding will be prioritized for direct medical education costs for programs serving medically underserved areas and populations. Part 3 states that all accredited allopathic and osteopathic residency programs in California are eligible to apply. Part 4 states that we are to conduct annual reviews of statewide physician shortages and that funds may be used to address such shortages in other specialties. CalMedForce launched in 2018 and has awarded nearly $114 million and 552 resident positions to date all over the state of California. We're grateful to each and every one of our awardees for participating in the effort to address California's physician shortage, especially in medically underserved communities. So of course, we're here today to talk about the annual review, which is the end of the year reporting requirement mandated by the CalMedForce grant. So quick overview, annual reviews were sent out by email to all awardees on June 15th. Emails are sent to both the primary contact and the program director that CalMedForce has on file. Please note if your residency program has been awarded for both fiscal year 2018-19 and fiscal year 2019-20, you will receive one email per award. The documents and links are unique to the award year, so please definitely look for both emails. If for some reason the annual review was not received by the right person, please email us at calmedforce@phcdocs.org and we would be more than happy to forward the information to the correct person. The annual review is a report due at the end of each 12-month reporting period that documents awardees' progress in meeting CalMedForce grant requirements. The annual review consists of 3 parts. Part 1 is a program assessment. In the email we sent you, there's an attached template containing all the questions that you'll find on the program assessment. However, awardees must submit their answers through the link provided. It's a Microsoft form. Part 2 is the financial report, which is an attachment where you will report expenses that occurred during the most recent 6-month period of January 2021 through June 2021. You can also report expenses from the previous reporting period, but only if they're new expenses and they weren't previously reported in the last report. So please only report new expenses. Oops. Part 3 is the resident change table. Please note the grant follows the resident cohort that were PGY1s at the start of the grant term. For fiscal year 2018-19 awardees, this was the cohort of residents that started in academic year 2019-20. For fiscal year 2019-20 awardees, this was the cohort of residents that started in academic year 2020-21. For this report, we're asking you just to report any changes that happened with this resident cohort, such as transfers, leave of absences, or dismissals. Additionally, we are requesting a copy of the most recent ACGME accreditation letter for the residency program. If your residency program received a site visit from ACGME during this reporting period, please also send documentation from the ACGME site visit. To summarize, all of this information was sent via email. You'll be asked to click a link to complete the program assessment, and you'll be asked to mail us back via email the financial report, resident change table, ACGME letter of accreditation for the residency program, and if applicable, the documentation from the ACGME site visit. Next, we'll discuss parts 1, 2, and 3 in further detail, starting with the program assessment. In the email we sent, we attached a template containing all the questions that you'll find on the program assessment. We recommend opening the template and preparing your answers for each question prior to clicking the link to fill out the answers. Please remember that if your residency program has been awarded for both years, you will receive 2 emails. Each email contains a unique link, and we ask that you complete each one for accurate data and tracking purposes. So 1 link for the 18-19, 1 link for the 19-20. All right, at this time, I'll pass it over to Victoria to continue going into detail on this section.
Thank you, Robin. So I'll be going over the program assessment portion of the annual review. The program assessment consists of 5 sections and is approximately 37 questions. The first 8 questions are contact information and the program assessment and financial report certifications. Questions 9 through 37 relate to program information, program development and training, payer mix, program outcomes, and successes and challenges. Please note that depending on how you answer certain questions, the question numbers may vary. Please begin by confirming that the assessment you are completing is for the correct grant cycle, and then please contact CalMedForce if you received the wrong form. Question 9 asks about any relevant resident changes. If you select yes and there were resident changes, please fill out the resident change table that was attached to the email sent on June 15th. And just a reminder again that for fiscal year 2018-19 awardees, you will report resident changes to the cohort that began in fall 2019. And for the fiscal year 2019-20 awardees, you will report resident changes to the cohort that began in fall 2020. If there were no resident changes, please select no and do not fill out a resident change table. If you are awarded for new or expanding positions, please indicate whether those positions were filled. If not, please provide an explanation in the text box. And if you were awarded for existing positions, select not applicable. Please select any changes that occurred to the residency program or sponsoring institution during the reporting period. If there were changes that are not listed, please provide details in the text box provided on question 13. Question 14 asks how your program has prioritized medically underserved areas and populations. Please select any and all that apply. Question 15 and 16 ask about any resident and faculty development and training related to medically underserved areas and populations. Questions 17 through 29 relate to payer mix. So please report the payer mix percentages for the beginning of the academic year 2020-2021 for the categories Medi-Cal, dual eligible, indigent, uninsured, and other payers. The percentages must equal 100%. If there were any changes to the payer mix from the beginning of the academic year to the current payer mix at the end of the academic year, please select yes on question 23. So if you select yes on 23, you will be directed to report the current payer mix for the same categories. And again, these percentages must equal 100%. So question 30, please provide the best estimate on how many patient encounters a resident has per day in the program. The next two questions relate to total patient encounters. So first, report how many residents your program was awarded for. If you are unsure, please reach out to CalMedForce and we can pull that number for you. Next, provide the best estimate for total patient encounters provided by the total number of residency positions funded by this grant. For example, if you were awarded 2 positions and those residents see about 200 patients total, the total patient encounters would be 400. Here we ask about the successes that the program experienced during the reporting period. This next question, please select how your program supports the growth of the physician pipeline. If needed, please provide additional information in the space provided. Please select any challenges the residency program has experienced during the reporting period. Question 36, as residency programs know firsthand, many new developments have occurred in the last year relating to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we ask you to please describe how the pandemic has affected your program. And this very last question asks awardees to provide any additional information from the reporting period that CalMedForce should know about or may be interested in. This question is not required, but it gives awardees the chance to brag a little, elaborate on any of the above questions, or provide any comments or suggestions. And now I will pass it over to my colleague, David Kurt.
Thank you, Victoria. So we're going to be going over the financial report. In the next few slides, we're going to talk about things in detail. So if the question doesn't come up just yet, or an answer, it may come up in subsequent slides. So as we go forward, the financial report is for the reporting period of July 1st, 2020 through June 30th of 2021. And so we ask that we do not report expenses that were already included in the last report. So what we're referring to is that semi-annual review that you did previously. So programs must account for all the dollars in the reporting period. So that includes any unused funds to date, as well as your eligible annual review payment. And just to a friendly reminder, we are doing a reimbursement model. So what that means is awardees must list expenses that occurred during the reporting period. The next payment is a reimbursement for those expenses. So best practices, please review all the tabs. That includes the instructions, the financial report itself, and the allowable costs that we stick in there for a tab. Please also note there are protected sections. So in the upper left corner of the financial report where we have the calculations, you'll notice you won't be able to click anywhere in there. And that's just for to keep things accurate and make sure things run smoothly, as well as we have zoom in features. So if you need to, all you have to do is just zoom in on the Excel sheet, and that should make things a little bit bigger for you. All right, so here's that first tab that I did mention that you'll get in part of your financial report. This will list the instructions. So left side, I'll kind of give you a bullet point view of what is need to be done and what needs to be looked at. And the right will kind of explain everything in detail, as well as talking about table 2, where it will describe the definitions of the payment calculations. So here we go. Here's a snapshot of the financial report. So on the left side, you'll have a brief overview of your grant agreement number, your program name, sponsoring institution name, reporting period, number of payments received to date. Please take a look at that to make sure the name, sponsoring institution, and grant agreement number are correct, followed by the payment calculations, which are protected, like I mentioned on the previous slide, as well as table 3, which we ask you to describe any unused funds. We can go in that in a little bit detail in the next couple of slides, as well as on the right side, we have the expense categories, the description and the amount for those expenses. All right, so table 2, payment calculation. So this is what's protected by passwords. You won't need to do really much to this. It will list if you have any unused funds to date. Not everybody will have unused funds to date, so if it's zeroed out, you do not have to worry anything about it. However, if there's a number that's just telling an amount of funds that you haven't spent yet. Year 3 payment 1 is to be sent after we process the annual review, and then the total funds available will be the sum of all that, and your program just needs to account for at least 75% of this amount. For whatever reason, if there are any expenses that have accrued and it hasn't equated to 0, you're going to see remaining funds, a balance of some kind. Okay, so here we have on the last tab that you're going to find in that financial report in that Excel sheet, you're going to see allowable costs. It's going to give you the expense type as well as the description to kind of help you out to try to figure out how to itemize your expenses, as well as a list of unallowable expenses. So table 3, let's say you have some unused funds. We just have you account here for all total available funds that you may not have expended just yet. So if your program, additionally, so if your program has not expended the remaining funds, we just ask you to plan how you plan to spend the remaining amount below, and just be as detailed as you can. So try not to be vague, try to go into detail just a little bit for each expense. That way it can be much easier during the administrative process to process your annual review if there are any unused funds remaining. All right, so speaking of the expense category, you're gonna notice a little arrow around that green square. It's gonna give you a list of all those expense categories, and then we just ask you to date them, provide a description, and the amount. So like you would probably provide an example for unused expenses, for here we ask the description to be just as detailed. Just make sure it's brief, but to the point of whatever the expenses were incurred. All right, so what I do mention is if you look at the very bottom, there's that green kind of bar, that green row underneath the expense category, description, and amount. Whatever you calculate here, it's going to show you a remaining amount at the bottom. So those two correlate with each other, and it should give a remaining funds balance based on how much you spend. All right, so now let's go into a little bit of detail. Allowable costs, which is the direct graduate medical education expenses. So this includes anything from contractual consultant costs, development of faculty, information technology systems, insurance, licensing fees, meals, medical equipment of a 10% cap, which we will go into a wee bit of detail in just a second, membership subscriptions, professional activity costs, the salaries and benefits of your residents and or your faculty, training and education, and perhaps travel or conferences as it directly relates to graduate medical education. All right, so medical equipment, what I just mentioned before. So the 10% max is, speaking of the 10% maximum of the total CalMedForce grant that your program has been awarded, may be spent on medical equipment. If you have any questions about this, please just reach out to CalMedForce if you need to check the remaining balance of your program of how much they still have left over or how much they can spend on medical equipment expenses. And if you're not dialed into that, and we'll be happy to do that. All right, so speaking of unallowable costs, overhead costs are not allowable as of January 1st, 2021. And so what we mean by overhead costs is administrative expenses that include expenditures for general items that support operational needs. So this includes printing, telephone, office supplies, and other general administrative expenses. So unallowable costs. So most of us are pretty familiar about what will be unallowable. It includes alcoholic beverages, renovation, the acquisition of land, entertainment, contributions or donations, being able to pay for fines or penalties, fundraising, lobbying or political activity, medical equipment that is not directly used for graduate medical education purposes, any pre-award costs, so anything that you accrued in costs prior to the award cannot be used, salary and wages that do not correlate with the advancement of GME, and some travel. And this is detailed in the Assembly Bill of 1887. All right, so we will be requesting documents, and one of the documents we're requesting is the ACGME letter of accreditation for the residency program. So it's a pretty standard letter. Most of you guys are familiar with what it looks like. Here is an example with redaction. And so those redacted pieces will have information that directly correlates to your program. And we will need not only the letter, but if there are any notes attached to this letter, such as areas for improvement, concerning trends, or notations of any kind, those will need to be included. All right, so we did touch briefly on this throughout the presentation. Attachment A, so whether it's 2018, 19, or 1920, the resident change table. So if you are reporting any resident changes that occurred in the past 6 months, then what we'll need you to do is go ahead and list those changes. However, if there were no changes in residents in the past 6 months, please, you don't have to fill out the tables. That's what's nice. No changes, you don't have to fill out the table. If there are some changes, we do ask for this attachment. All right, now I'll pass this on to Robin.
Thanks so much, David. And just wanted to point out to everyone, there have been a few questions in the chat that we have been able to address. So feel free to take a look, and if you have a question in mind as well, it may have been answered in the chat. So feel free to keep those questions coming. All right, just as a quick summary, all annual review items must be complete in order to receive the next payment. So the submission of reports does prompt your next payment. So we will be looking for a complete submission, all documents, no missing documents, everything must be received in order to be eligible to receive the next payment. Once again, the reporting period is July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. However, that said, on the financial report, we do not want expenses that were previously reported. So do not include expenses that were reported on previous reports, just new expenses, and focusing on the previous 6-month period for that financial report. Again, on the financial report, awardees are expected to account for the available funds. So programs must expend or account for at least 75% of the total available funds. If funds have not been expended, we are looking for a detailed explanation of the planned use of the remaining funds. And that's okay if you haven't spent everything. That's all right. Just make sure you're providing that detailed explanation. And we do want to just caution our 18-19 awardees who are 3-year programs, because you are entering your final year of this grant. So you do want to spend all of your funds by the end of year 3 if you are a 3-year program. And just a heads up, the answers will be aggregated and used for reporting purposes. I want to take a moment on this slide regarding payment details following the submission of the annual review. I touched on this briefly just now. So for our 18-19 awardees, this is also known as cohort 1. If you are a 3-year program, you are entering your 3rd and final year of this of the award. So the payment that you will receive, once again, if you're an 18-19 awardee entering the 3rd and final year of your award, you will be receiving 25% of year 3 funds. And that's because our 18-19 awardees for their final year will receive 25%, 50%, and then another 25% in the final year. If you're an 18-19 awardee that is a 4-year program, you're going to continue the same payment schedule that you had in year 1 and 2, which this payment will be 50% of your year 3 funds. So 50% of year 3 funds if you are in year 3 of 4. And then for our 19-20 awardees, you can expect 50% of your year 1 funds. So you already received 50%, and this will be your second 50% of year 1 funds. I do just want to bring to everyone's attention that 18-19 awardees and 19-20 awardees, the payment schedules are different. So if you're someone that has awards for both programs, it can get a little confusing. So please don't hesitate to reach out to our staff. I definitely can send a full payment schedule if that's something that you would like to have in front of you as well. Next steps. So the annual reviews are due July 31st, 2021. So you do have about a little over a month to complete all the documents and turn them in. Once again, as a reminder, part of it will be the program assessment completed through the link provided in the email via a Microsoft Form survey. And then the other piece is to submit the requested documents to reports@phcdocs.org. This is an email address that we use specifically to receive report documents. And at this time, we can definitely stop to see if there are any questions in the chat that have not been answered. So I will ask David if he can maybe help us out with this section to answer any questions in the chat.
Yeah, it looks like we've answered most of them except for one. So the question is, under faculty development, there are allowable costs that foster well-being of faculty and residents. Does this cover wellness events such as faculty resident retreat? Would that be allowed as faculty well-being or unallowed as entertainment?
That's a really good question. I think that's definitely a fine line. I think it would depend on what was being purchased, like what were the individual line items being purchased. We know that food would be an allowable cost. I know that is included specifically as allowable. If it was, other types of entertainment, that's where I might want to check with our legal team. So for the individual awardee that asked that question, if you'd like to email us with this, some of the specific line items that you are thinking about purchasing, I'd love to be on the safe side and just make sure that we're not going against the intent of Prop 56. So we can absolutely check with our legal team on those specific line items. All right, other questions, David?
That's the last one so far. The other questions have been answered via the little box on the right. So.
Okay, perfect. Because we have a little extra time, I'll just kind of summarize those in case people can't see the chat. So the first one was, who do we contact if we did not receive the email? and that is our staff at CalMedForce at phcdocs.org. So just let us know who the correct person is, and we're happy to resend. Second question was, does the resident change table apply to all residents in the program or just the funded positions? And for this one, this does apply to all residents in the cohort, not just ones that we provided funding for, so your entire resident cohort. Is the payer mix for the sponsored institution or for the primary care clinic site? So for payer mix, we are asking specifically about the primary site. For the next question, what's the difference between uninsured and indigent? So we did provide in the chat the definition for indigent. And if you don't have that category at your facility, you could definitely put use the uninsured category instead. And just for everyone's knowledge, the definition of indigent is in the chat, but it's also located in our grant guidelines. Next question is, does the patient encounter number question apply to the hospital encounters, primary clinic, or both? For that question, we'd love an overall estimate, so both would be the answer. Looking for an overall estimate of patient encounters for the residents. All right, and then I'm seeing another question. Mm-hmm. Can you review page 26 again? I'm wondering if that means slide 26. I can go back.
Yeah, she was. Ms. Smith was referring to slide 26. Yeah.
Yeah, David, I think this was your slide. You want to run through these bullet points one more time?
Yeah, of course. So on the financial report, so the reporting period that you're going to be reporting for is July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. So we just ask that you don't report any expenses that were included in the last report. So what we're referring to is that semi-annual just completed previously. Now for programs, must account for all dollars in that reporting period. So any unused funds to date, and of course the eligible annual review payment that you will be receiving. And just remember to, as a friendly reminder, that the reimbursement model applies here. So awardees must list expenses that occurred during the reporting period, and the next payment is a reimbursement for those expenses.
Thanks, David. And I also want to emphasize that our staff is always available to hop on a call with any awardees if you have any specific questions about any part of the report. We're happy to assist with that on an individual basis as well. We definitely want to be of assistance while you're filling out that report and help answer any questions that come up along the way. I see a question, when is the application due? And not sure if we're talking about this report, the annual review, or perhaps the upcoming application cycle, but I can answer both of those. For this annual review, the due date for this report is July 31st, 2021. But I will take the opportunity to let everyone on the call know that CalMedForce is opening the 4th application cycle this coming August 2nd, and will be open until September 17th. So definitely encourage all of you to apply for funding again, as programs are eligible to receive more than one award. All right, other questions? Great questions, everyone. Thank you so much. All right, and while we're waiting for any other final questions to come in, just want to share our contact information. So if you're not already familiar, our website is calmedforce.org. Our general email address that we check daily and are very responsive to is calmedforce@phcdocs.org. Our phone number is here as well. And if you need for any reason to contact any individual on our team, we have our individual names and contact information here as well. All right, with that, I'm not seeing any other questions. So just want to thank everyone so much for attending, taking the time to listen. We will post the recording, and want to thank my staff who are on the call as well. Hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye.